Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate all you listeners out there. So today we're going to talk with Elizabeth Bachman. And, I spent about 5 minutes with her and she came up with 3 really great ideas and inspirational thoughts for things that I could work on or somewhere that she listened to me chat about my podcast or my work and listened to me for maybe 15 minutes. And she had like 3 really out of the box ideas that were just really amazing. So I love chatting with her. She's got really big ideas. And it's really neat to have someone that kind of picks up on what you're trying to do in this universe, maybe even a little bit before you know that's what you're trying to do. So I really hope that you listen to her story and love what she says as much as I do. Let's get started.
Good morning. Well, we have Elizabeth Bachman here with us. She is the CEO of Strategic Speaking for Results. And I'm so excited because I really want to get to be a better public speaker. And so kind of understanding how her journey went and how she came to be where she's at. I'm really excited to get to learn about that. So thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us.
Oh, it's my honor, Lorie. Thank you.
So my very first question is always the same. I love reading. I just adore it. What is your favorite book?
Well, I read novels. I read them very fast. I read them often. And I'm often reading science fiction and fantasy with occasional forays into novels, kind of mystery-ish. And lately I have been obsessed with the novels of Kate Quinn, historical novels. She wrote a series set in Rome, and those were okay, not so great. But then she got into stories about World War II and the aftermath. And those are brilliant. Those just blow your mind. So if anybody wants to start, the Alice Network is a great one to start with.
Well, tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get where you're at? Kind of what do you do? What brought you to who you are now?
So what I do now is work as a presentation skills trainer and executive coach for high-level corporate women executives who are hitting a glass ceiling. And I help them shift the way they're perceived by shifting the way they communicate. And fundamentally, it's like, how do you market yourself to an audience? Speaking in public is one of the best ways to become known and show how smart you are. In the corporate world, people aren't really taught how to market themselves. So going back, I started as an actor when I was 5. First time I ever walked on stage at the age of 5. Afterwards, I heard my mom say that I was the best damn bunny rabbit ever to grace the stage of the Hillside School. And I was hooked. It's like, oh, they like me. I often think applause is the most addictive drug out there. And I worked my way up from acting to directing. And then I went off to college on the East Coast within calling distance of New York City. And there were all these kids who'd had Broadway actors running their high school theater. And a lot of them were way better than I was. But I was a good director. And I also had a parallel interest in languages. After college, with a degree in French and a degree in directing, not really knowing what I was going to do to it, I moved to New York City to figure out what I was going to do and fell into opera. And that's where I stayed for 30 years, working my way up from my first job was indeed driving the truck and sweeping the stage and being 50% of the staff for a small touring opera company. up to directing at the Metropolitan Opera and internationally. From there to running my own opera company in Austria. And then after 30 years of it, I burned out. The opera company in Austria, we were in the state of Tyrol, where they play Papa music and they weigh dirndls and lederhosen and so forth. It was an international exchange program disguised as an opera company, mostly focused on helping young singers get experience. And when you're working with young artists, it's the same 20 arias over and over. And I thought, okay, it's work. If I don't stop now, I will lose the ability to be moved by the music.
Mhm.
And any job in the arts is hard enough. If you don't love it anymore, it's time to stop.
Mhm.
And by then I was already doing speaker training, which evolved from helping my friends to becoming actually trained in it and working my way up through the ranks there to combining all of that into what I do now. The other piece of it is that part of being one of the early women stage directors in America, I was still early on in my career, they would still do articles in the local paper, wherever I was, about what is it like as a woman to direct Madama Butterfly? Do you have a different viewpoint of it as a woman? And I wanted to run an opera company, knew I'd be good at it. And my colleagues all said, wow, yeah, you'd be great. Go ahead. Any opera company you run, we'll be there. You bet. So over the course of about 3 years, every time there was an opening, I would apply.
Mhm.
I was always on the short list, and I always saw the job go to a man. And part of it, I understood at the time that this was in the late 90s,
Uh-huh.
early 2000s. When you're worried about money, the inclination is to trust a man more than a woman. What I didn't understand at the time was that I was marketing myself to the wrong people. And being well known and appreciated by my colleagues wasn't good enough. I should have been marketing myself to the boards. And I didn't understand that at that time. And I didn't know that I should ask for help, that this was that being able to do the job was great. But that old saying of what got you here won't get you there. Basically, I'd gotten as far as I could by being really good at what I did, but getting in upper management to be like vice president or C-level was a whole different set of skills. And I didn't understand that.
Mhm.
So I started my own opera company because nobody would hire me. But it was also hard enough that I now know I was hitting a glass ceiling. I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't know how to ask for help and who to ask for help.
Mhm.
And that's what motivates me now is I see women over and over, especially in the corporate realm, who get to a certain point, shall we say, director, senior director. That's as far as you get through skill and ability.
Uh-huh.
And to get from that to VP or C-level, you have to have a different mindset. So now what I work with, often with women who are in their late 40s, 50s, or 60s, because up until then, if you work harder, you probably will be rewarded.
Uh-huh.
But ageism comes into play and you aren't the wunderkind anymore. You aren't the exciting new thing, but you're still considered a worker bee. Someone who just does a good, solid job. And that doesn't get you that promotion. That's the problem I solve, is getting past that glass ceiling through presentation skills, through speaking. And if you want to get your thought leadership out there, you've got to speak. So I think of it as executive coaching through the lens of presentation skills. How do you show up?
So you said two words that usually strike terror into most people, and that is public speaking. Have you found that? Is that a lot of people will come to you just terrified of even the thought of getting up in front of a large group?
Most of the time, if they are at the director or senior director level, they have done some speaking. You pretty much have to. Whether you're doing it well, that's the problem. I mean, we've all sat through those presentations where somebody talks like this and they put up the slides and then they just read the slides and it's boring, 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 boring. Learning how to do it well is what puts you on the map.
Yeah.
And what makes people notice it. And to a certain extent, if you're inside an organization or in an industry where everybody knows you, You've got to speak outside that industry and then ask people to get the testimonials, have people comment, because that gives you third-party validation. When somebody else tells the CEO, wow, Lorie gave the most amazing speech, she just blew my mind, the CEO is going to go, oh, Lorie, I didn't know you knew all that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had a client call me up and they said, so I did the speech and I got back to the office and my colleagues all said, I didn't know you knew all that. So it's positioning yourself the right way, owning your brilliance, figuring out what makes you different. What's your slant on the problem? What problem do you solve?
Mm-hmm.
And I just love getting into that.
You can hear it in your voice. You can hear that you love it. And we have a similar mindset in that, like, encouraging women to grow and do better and empower them, giving them the tools they need to succeed in this world is a strong passion of mine as well. But, well, tell me, Elizabeth, what is the best investment you've made in yourself? If you could look back and think through that journey, and there was a lot of pivots, you're right. So fascinating. I think we could spend a whole hour just talking about all the different places you went through to get where you're at. But can you think of one thing that you were like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I did that. If I didn't, my whole life would have turned out differently?
I think the biggest pivot was when I realized that I was no longer fashionable as a director. Basically, my career ended before I was ready. And I wasn't the hot young thing anymore. I was a known quantity and not as exciting. I needed to shift the way I was perceived. I didn't have that language then. And so I started the opera company, but it's a nonprofit. And what I didn't realize was I did have people to ask, and people to help me. So how do you put this together? I knew how to run the production part of the company, because that's what I've been doing for 30 years. I knew what it cost to rent 5 pianos, for instance. But in order to do it, I had to form a nonprofit and I had to raise $100,000 to start, which sure as heck wasn't in my bank account. So I had to speak to raise money. And that's where I learned the art of speaking to raise money. So the biggest risk was saying I was going to do the opera. I was going to create this opera company. Then the biggest investment was, frankly, when I started doing these fundraisers, I was terrible. I was terrified and terrible. And a woman who was a speaker trainer, but who liked music, came to one of my house parties. And she called me up the next day and she said, there are some things you could do that would get you better results. Do you want to hear about them? And it just blew my mind. I had no idea that public speaking was a thing. I had never run across that. I'd been on stage since I was 5. So I could get out there and talk. Learning how to speak to get people to open their wallets was a whole different thing. And I really thought about it. And she was expensive. And I thought, my dedication to the people who need what I can teach them has to be greater than my fear. And so I scrounged around and borrowed and scrambled and came up with the money and hired her. And that was the first of many, many coaches that I've had. And then I have continued. Once you've hired your first coach, then you understand how useful it is. And then it paid off. The first time I went to someone in her living room and told her what I was going to try to build, and would she please, give me a donation, maybe $100, $500, and she wrote a check for $3,000.
Oh, wow.
And it said, I believe in what you're trying to do. Here's a full scholarship. Use this money to sponsor somebody.
Wow.
And I thought, this is what it's about.
That's amazing. That's really cool. And I do think that I God bless those people that are like, she wasn't like, oh, you're terrible.
Yeah.
That
was after I'd had some training. So that was the first time I went to somebody expecting 100 and got 3,000. And but the other thing is raising $100,000, mostly in $100 increments. Yeah, it took me twice as long as I thought it would.
Yeah.
But we did it. And then we ran for 11 years. And I learned a whole lot along the way, made a lot of mistakes, learned a whole lot. And ultimately, the market changed. So we closed honorably for assorted reasons. chiefly among them because it was just getting to be rote for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, it's time to do something else. 10 years earlier, I would have never thought I would do something else. And maybe that comes with maturity. I thought I would have kept on directing operas forever and never, I have friends that sat next to me when we were lowly assistants in the assistant stage manager office who are still out there directing, and good for them. It's very few.
Can you think of some really bad advice that you got through your journey where you're at today? And did you take the advice? Did you not take the advice? Tell me about that.
Well, I think I said I made a lot of mistakes.
Learning experiences, we call them.
Learning experiences. Yes, lots of learning experiences. And, if anybody's listening was working for me in the early days, I apologize. I was like, okay, I got better. Sorry. Well, I think you have to screw up in order to learn. And hopefully you don't leave too much damage around you. You sent me this question and I thought about it. And I thought the advice I got was not one piece of advice. And this motivates what I fight about now. I fight for gender equity and inclusion, equal pay for everybody, equal pay for the same job. And because the advice I got was being socialized to be a good girl and don't ask for money because the bad advice were all those voices, all those foremothers in my head who kept me small. And I listened. And I did it. And so the thing that I really regret is all the years that I sold myself for cheap.
Mm-hmm.
I sold myself for much less than I was worth because I was too scared to ask for more.
Mm-hmm.
I was too scared to actually ask for money. I would wait until somebody told me what was in the budget and I say, sure, that's fine. Because I was so happy that they would take me at all, because inside there was the voice saying, who are you? They're never going to listen to you. Don't offend anybody by asking for too much. I don't think anybody ever said that directly. I think that comes from socialization, the way girls are socialized. Maybe not so much now, but in my day. And so a huge part of the work I do now is helping women fight against that conditioning.
It isn't only, I found, you're right, I have to tell my young women in my office, I'm like, go figure out what you're worth and don't accept less than that. And they're like, well, where do I find that? And I explained to them exactly how to get, a raise. And that was because I had a great mentor that taught me not to take less than what I was worth. But I find that that's across the board too. I'll find my sons going, it feels like men most of the time are more willing to ask for what they want. And if they ask, a lot of times their supervisors find a way to give it to them because they know they've asked for it. They know what they want. And so man or woman, boy or girl, whatever, whoever I'm teaching, I do always say, ask, figure out what it is you're worth, ask for it.
I wish I had known you in my 20s because it took me an embarrassingly long time to learn how to ask for what I was worth. All the messages were play it safe, stay small, don't dare, don't take the leap. So now, as an older person who suffered through that, now I help other people say, okay, yes, you can do it.
Yeah. Find a voice, be fearless, try it. What's the worst that can happen? I always tell them they can't take away your birthday, right?
That's a good phrase. Yeah, it is. Well, that socialization is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
Is there a situation through your journey, Elizabeth, that you can look back on and I'm not going to say regret exactly, but is there something that you're like, ooh, if I know now what I knew then, I would totally do that differently?
Again, I think I've been talking about regrets the whole time. Yeah. I should talk about some successes. The situations, lots of little regrets, taking the safe choice. And the big regret, I think, is not realizing that I could get help in applying to run an opera company. It didn't occur to me that taking that big step required different skills. So here's another thing. I think that men and women historically and traditionally have two different ways of thinking. It's traditionally men, the single focus thinking that says it's about me and I can do one thing at a time. And that helps them go out and ask because it doesn't occur to them that there's a risk. It doesn't occur to them that they might fail as they're young. Women are relational thinkers. And it's not nearly that binary. There's a whole spectrum. But historically, traditionally, women are multi-focused relational thinkers, which allows you to see all the side issues that the single focus thinkers might miss. So that's important. The disadvantage is that if you see the world in a web of relationships, everything's about you. And if someone says no, they're rejecting you, not your idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it all becomes personal. And that's another thing I didn't learn until years later, that I thought just being me with all the things that I knew how to do would qualify me for that big promotion to running an opera company. And I didn't understand at the time that I had to position myself differently. And no one was going to take it for granted about what I knew. I had to learn how to tell them.
Uh-huh.
And so learning how to talk about what I was good at and learning how to speak a language that would get them excited was what would make the sale.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Did you get better at it? This is like go back and do it differently. Did you get better at learning how to ask for help? And how did you get better at learning how to ask for help? I'm assuming you did.
I learned how to ask for help when I started the opera company.
Uh-huh.
And then I couldn't do it all myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to ask people to pay me money. The big, scary money conversation. I had to ask people to give me money. And since it was my company, it was giving money to me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned, thanks to this first trainer, God bless her, was that I could have them give money to the cause of creating this opera company, of helping these young singers. I was just the medium through whom this result would be achieved. I knew I could change people's lives if I could just get them to come to Austria for those 3 weeks in the summer, for that summer festival. I could change people's lives. I had to learn how to tell people that their $100 or $500 or $3,000 would make it possible. And that was learning what motivated the donors. What motivated the donors was what the singers did. You have to fold it all in under sponsoring the singers, because sponsoring the singers is what they care about.
That makes sense. What about if you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of your journey? Talk to your 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old. Talk to you when you were young, just on the start of this exciting new place you were headed. What would you tell her?
I would tell her, you can do this. I would tell her to ask for help. Find the mentors, find the Lorie Jones who will tell you to go for it. One thing, particularly for relational thinkers, is you need the group of peers, people who are at the same stage as you are, who will say, great, go for it. We believe in you. We know you can do this. And there's this whole myth of, I ought to be able to do it myself. I had to crash and burn a couple of times before I figured out where to go for help and how to find the help. And the other thing is that different people are the right mentor for you at different stages in your life. So it's okay to move on, but be looking for the people who believe in you and will sponsor you, will mentor you.
I had someone say, find your tribe. And that's always kind of stuck with me. And you find people that are good, supportive, but also that are not afraid to say, hey, do you want some help with that? In the nicest way possible.
Well, and I had a tribe, but it was a tribe of peers. There's this thing that girls are taught that don't ask for what you need because you're imposing, you're bothering people. And that one took me a long time. Actually, it was becoming a boss and running a company that made me realize, I have to give clear instructions and actually ask for something. Another thing women do often is hint, because there's this underlying thank you, grandma and great grandma and all the ancestresses who say, don't be a bother. Don't ask for what you need. And so finding mentors who are ahead of you on the path, who know the business and are willing to help a young person, and then be smart about how you ask, but ask. That's something that I didn't learn until later. And I wish I'd known that in my 20s. I actually had some mentors who helped me, and I did take their advice. Like the one who said, you're never going to be a famous actress, but you could be a famous director. Giving up on that dream was, I had a mentor who said, if you don't have to act, if it's not the most important thing in your life, do something else. Figure out what you really want to get out of the experience of being in the theater, which for me was having that community. And then see what else you can do. And she said, the advantage of this is you have choices. The ones who really must act, that's the only thing that matters, they're trapped because that's all they can do. And the way she phrased it made me say, oh, I have choices. Okay, I don't have to be an actor. I can spare myself that heartache. And because it would have been heartache, I wouldn't have done very well to say, but I could be a really good director.
That's interesting. They expanded your mind and kind of helped you think outside the box. A lot of times we get stuck inside our own thinking, inside our own brain, and we can only see one way forward. And I do like the idea that, that these mentors, these people that we surround ourselves with, they have a bigger view. They can see maybe more possibilities than we can.
Yeah. And so then be willing to listen and be willing to think about it. And, some of it's also just growing up, the experience of going to college, and you might have been top dog in your high school, but so was everybody else at college. And and some of them were much topper dogs than you were. Almost every freshman runs into that and goes, ooh, okay, I'm playing in a bigger game now. What do I do? So that was part of what happened to me. And then leaving college and going to work. I will say that I'm proud, having been in the opera business for 30 years professionally. Fewer than 5% of people who have gotten a master's degree in, basket weaving or painting or flute or dance or anything. Fewer than 5% of them wind up making a living with their art. And I did make a living with my art. Of that 5%, fewer than 5% make it past 10 years. It's like sports. Fewer than 5% of the high school stars make it into the major leagues or the professional sports. And then maybe you get 10 years before you're sidelined by injury, or there's just a hot young pitcher who comes in, or, a hot young goalie who comes in and you're not as interesting anymore. They know you. The statistics are the same for the arts and for sports. So I'm very proud that I made it into that first 5%. Not making it into the second 5% was really hard. And it took me a while to come to terms with that dream ended. And it wasn't my choice. But my life is so much richer now. And people said, your life is going to be so much richer. And I didn't believe them. And so that's also, the period of mourning the loss of the thing you loved and then finding something else. It just takes the time it takes.
That's so interesting. That's true. And it's true for just about everything. You have a period of mourning, and if you try and rush it or get past it or not do it, it doesn't work. You have to kind of go through the process, the learning process, mourning for what you did, what you messed up or what you did wrong or how you didn't do or what you weren't able to accomplish before you can move on. And it usually does end up being better in the end, but you can't skip that phase, right?
Yeah, damn it. I know. I know. I wish, the only way out is through.
Yeah.
And when you're in the middle of it, it's really hard. And that's part of life.
Yeah.
And it's part of growing up and in life and surviving. I guess, it starts when your first high school crush, girlfriend or boyfriend dumps you and you think you're never going to get better. And then, then if you survive that one, you can survive the next one and the next one. It just, it's part of the roller coaster of life. But I wouldn't trade it. There are plenty of things I wish I could have done better, been smarter about it. Mostly it was just learning to ask for help. I wish I'd asked for help earlier. I would still have screwed up, but maybe I would have screwed up maybe some of it wouldn't have been quite so painful. I don't know. I can't change it. It is what it is. And also that pain helps me now help the others when they're going through it.
Helps add your experience and that sense of empathy. I've been there where you're at. I feel what you're feeling. You're going to make it.
I often say is, look, I know you don't feel it now. I'm going to believe in you until you're ready to believe in yourself. I'm going to do everything I can, but I'm here to help you. And that, I think, is how you're supposed to pass it on. People helped me. And I will tell you that the best part of what I do is when I've been working with somebody to put together her speech, for instance, and then she goes out and she does it. And she's not thinking about what she's going to do with her hands if it's live, or she's not thinking about what comes next or how she's going to do it, because we've done all that. That's the craft that I teach. So that she's open to being a channel for the art of her ideas. I teach the craft so that you can be a channel for art, because I do think that the great ideas come from someplace above us, some sort of inspiration. And our job as presenters, as speakers, is to channel that. Let's say it's divine inspiration. If you're a singer, it's like be a channel for Mozart. If you're a speaker, it's be a channel for an idea. This life can be better. We could be better than this, and be a channel for that. But if you gave people the direct inspiration from heaven or higher power, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, you drown them. It's like hitting them with the fire hose or making them stand under a waterfall. So our job as presenters is to take that idea and shape it and craft it and hone it so that your delivery of that idea comes to people in a form that they can take in and go, she's talking about me. I never thought of that it really reaches them from the heart. That's what I'm about.
Elizabeth, did you end up facing any unique challenges because of your gender through your journey?
Well, being one of the early women and people saying, is it strange? So I was always sort of fighting to be taken seriously. I remember in college, saying, there she is, the dizzy blonde. I had long blonde hair down to my waist and I liked to run around. They said, you really are a space cadet, aren't you? And I thought, no, I'm actually, I like that part, but there's a real brain under here. I think about the movie Legally Blonde and Reese Witherspoon not being taken seriously because she's cute and blonde and she wears pink, and learning how to shift the way she was perceived by shifting the way she communicated, the way she showed up. So being taken seriously as an artist, as a business person, and my job as a director was to have an idea. And then I meet with a group of really talented people and convince them to work together towards an end. And then in the process, pulling the best out of each person as you go. So it's leading a team and then delivering a result by the deadline. And on the other part of it, which a lot of working artists don't understand, is I always felt like a producer. I had to deliver a result that would get the audience so excited that they would write a check to support a company, that they would come back.
So, Elizabeth, what are you most proud of?
That I kept going, that, fell down and got back up again, and that I'm still going, and that the people I work with, I watch them change their lives. I watch them step into a level of skill that they used to think was impossible. One more story, which is I had a wonderful client about 4 or 5 years ago now, who had been, she's an IT person, and she was stuck at the level of senior director for 13 years, taken for granted, always solving problems for the company. And she finally got fed up. And somebody said, she talked to her friend, and her friend said, go talk to Elizabeth Bachman. And she talked to me and she said, okay, there's this new thing. They want me to fix it. I know how to fix it, but I'm tired of not being recognized. And so we shifted the way she communicated. And so the way she presented what she wanted to do, we framed it all as, this is my strategic thinking. And then she went individually to everybody in the C-suite, and she framed it in a way that would speak to that person. One person wanted to know the numbers. Tell the CFO, this is the financial impact. Tell the COO, here's what we're going to do, but there's an operations thing. You know these people better than I do. Will you help me with this? And to get them all excited about the project, which is what she was going to do anyway. And they were so happy about it that the next time the executive committee met, they created a new vice president position for her. So she did what she was going to do anyway, but she got the raise, she got the promotion, she got the recognition, all because of the way she spoke about it.
any advice for a young woman who's just starting down this path you're already so successful at? Is there anything you would tell her at the beginning of her journey?
Ask for help. Look for mentors. Ask for help.
All the time, every day.
Well, yeah, you don't have to do it alone. Yeah, look for help.
And if I have a listener that wants to get a hold of you, Elizabeth, to ask for help or ask a question or, help her down her journey, how's the best way to connect with you?
The place I'm easily found is on LinkedIn. And I'm Elizabeth with a Z and Bachman, Bachman. And just reach out to me on LinkedIn and say that you heard me on Lorie's podcast. And I'd be happy to talk to you.
Well, thank you so, so much for taking this time out of your day and kind of just having this conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot and I've really grown. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorie.